children, you know this right into the guys.
If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Don't we have Robert Meyer Burnett on today? Yes. And don't we have a special intro for him? Oh, man. Hold on a second. Light the fires, Valhalla, and make some noise! He's an American filmmaker, producer, and fellow YouTuber. He's been instrumental in Star Trek, The Hills Run Red, and The John Campea Show. He's a red-blooded American if there ever was one. Valhalla, get on your feet, because ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I present to you, Robert Meyer Burnett is live on Mornings of Mischief. How are you doing?
Well, I don't even know what to say to that introduction. I mean, I was getting patriotic. Wow. Thank you so much for that. That was, I want to do the whole Wayne's World thing and say, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
I love doing intros like that. I love doing intros, period. I got into film editing like 20 years ago, and I love doing intros. And anytime I have anyone that I absolutely love, like Ass from Heels versus Babyface, I've got to do a special intro just for you guys.
Well, I'm deeply honored. Thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. It is so nice to get to sit down and talk to you.
Well, yeah, it's a pleasure to be asked. You know, I mean, I think one of sort of the basic tenets of my life is to increase conversation among anyone in the fan world, you know, and that's the whole sort of point of my own YouTube channel is to talk to people, you know, and hear their stories and share my stories with them if people want to know. And so when I was, you know, when you guys asked, I figured, heck yeah, I'll come on and talk to you guys. Why not?
Well, that is so awesome. Some people aren't like that, but it is so awesome that you're here, and my chat absolutely loves you. I know they do, and they're absolutely crazy. This is kind of like an afternoon special just for today. Usually we run 8 a.m. in the morning, and we'll run at 7 at night.
Oh wow,
and,
okay.
But we're Monday through Friday. I'd like to think of it like kind of like a rebel radio in the morning show on your way to work driving. But tell us about you. I know there are a million questions I could ask you, and believe me, people have been sending me stuff like all week. You're gonna have R&B on. Ask him this. Ask him.
I don't
this.
even know where to. You'd have to ask. I wouldn't know where to begin.
My producer has been sending me lists of questions. I'm like, listen, I'm going to ask him about him. I want to know about him. I want to know, how did he get here? Why is it when the cancel guys come out in force, he's like, no, I'm not bending the knee, and you don't. How did you get here? I mean, what inspired you to do what you do?
Oh, that's a big question. I mean, here's the thing. My interests in the genre, in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and movies and television and comics and all of that, anything that I guess you would call fandom, I guess it found me. It started when I was a little kid. I mean, my interests, my mom always jokes that, you know, Bob, you're interested in the same things you were interested in when you were 5. And that's really kind of true. And so when I was a kid, I was obsessed. The first thing I was obsessed with was Star Trek, the original series. And the thing about Star Trek is like when I was a kid, I didn't quite understand all of it, but that's what I think was part of the appeal. And there was back then, back in the old days when you only had 3 channels, 3 networks, and then we had 2 independent stations. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I lived I had a great upbringing. My parents were great, and my parents were people that never had an unkind word to say about anyone.
Yeah.
I never heard my parents pretty much liked everybody, and everyone sort of liked my dad, and my dad liked people. He liked all different kinds of people. And I think that that sort of, and my dad was a big reader. Even though he always read Reader's Digest condensed books, which I thought was so funny, he was always reading. And my parents, my interest, I was really into things. And like I had to watch Star Trek. Star Trek was on every night at 6 o'clock. And then it led me to things like the original Twilight Zone. And then on Sunday afternoons, we had sci-fi theater. And so it was all kind of this between sci-fi theater, the Twilight Zone, and Star Trek. And then I started watching, sci-fi theater brought me movies like War of the Worlds and When Worlds Collide and Conquest of Space and Destination Moon. And they were all made by the same guy, this producer, George Pal. So he was like my first hero. And I've told this story before, but when I saw War of the Worlds, it changed my life. The original 1953 Byron Haskin version. And I remember on a summer vacation, we were going to the Oregon coast, and I was with my mom and my grandmother, and we were going to visit my aunt, who was my grandmother's sister. And I basically spent the 3.5-hour drive from Seattle to the Oregon coast recounting in graphic detail everything I could remember about War of the Worlds to my grandmother. Like it took the entire drive. I was so into this movie that I told her and she just, she thought it was hilarious and would nod. Okay, Bobby, if that sounds great. And I kept going like, Grandma, the Martians fried a priest. We grew up we grew up Jewish, but my best friend was Catholic, and I had gone to church with him because my parents wanted to expose us to different things. And I remember I liked going to church because I liked the pageantry of it all. I liked the whole, I didn't really understand the differences between religion. Didn't we all believe in God? I didn't quite get it, but there was something interesting that was different than what it was like to be Jewish. And when the Martians come out of the gully in War of the Worlds, there's a priest, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will. And the Martians kill him. They fry the priest, and like God does not help you. No. So I'm like 5 years old, and I'm like, man, I guess I can't rely on God to save me from an alien invasion because that's the end of that. So, but I knew then, as a little kid, that that this material was adult. That even though it was science fiction, fantasy, and horror, there were adult themes coursing through all of it. And I could tell that from the Twilight Zone, which I didn't understand a lot of the irony but I love those stories. And the first story I ever remember seeing from Twilight Zone was an episode called To Serve Man, which is the famous episode when the Canamites come down and they have the book To Serve Man. And it turns out it's a cookbook in the end. And they've just basically come down to eat human beings, and I remember when I realized that, I'm like, I was terrified, but I also thought that was the coolest thing ever. And because it was dark, and I'm like, aliens are going to eat us, just like it should be. If aliens are going to fry priests, why wouldn't they eat us for dinner too? So it was kind of like, that's kind of what got me started. And then I started reading, and then when Star Wars came out when I was 10, it changed my life. And the idea, the thing that people forget about Star Wars, because a lot of people weren't around then, a lot of people in the fan community, because I'm that old, but Star Wars brought home the magic of movie making. Suddenly there was a documentary, The Making of Star Wars, that Mark Hamill hosted, that went through cinema history and then showed blue screen work and the miniature work and how movies were made. And I remember being utterly fascinated by that. And my parents, the first time I went to California, we went to Universal Studios. And when we were there, they were actually, I was lucky where the Jaws, the shark, the Bruce, the shark that comes out of the water, they were also shooting a miniature sequence for Airport 77. And I built spaceship models and all kinds of models, and I loved models. And I actually saw, I was lucky when the tram was going by, they were actually shooting in this tank, the 747 hitting the oil derrick that was in the movie before it crashes into the Bermuda Triangle and sinks. And I got to see that, and I'm like, oh my God, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And that was and I was 9 when I actually saw that. And that was it, man. I wanted to make movies. And then there was the dawn of the home video era, and my friend Jimmy Fiddler's dad got a VCR, and then somehow he was able to buy a bootleg video of Star Wars. And this was like the year after Star Wars came out. I mean, there was no home video then yet. And we would go over to his house and watch this just horrible quality tape. You could barely see it of Star Wars. And we watch it every day. And it kind of went from there. And one of the things that something like Star Wars did is I started listening to classical music because I wanted to hear other kinds of music that was like the Star Wars soundtrack. And so I found my mom's Beethoven records. And then I started hearing pieces of Beethoven music in other movies. And it all sort of, I was already a voracious reader, and all of it it was all part of the same thing, whether it was music, whether it was books, comics, it was all part of, you had to know about all of it.
Yeah.
And it was all like, my fandom was not relegated to just one thing. And at the same time, I loved action figures even back then because I was acting out stories with them. Like it would take me an entire day to play out a scenario in my head with my Star Wars action figures. Like at first I would go through my whole house and I would bring okay, my Death Star play set's going to go into our living room. And I would start in my bedroom, and I had to have my adventure and work my way all the way through our house to get to the Imperial base. So I would have 10 different mini adventures that would lead into this larger adventure when I was going to assault the Death Star. And it drove my parents bonkers. They're like, why are your figures and spaceships all over the house? And I would have to explain, and I would do the music and the voices and make all the explosions, and drove my dad nuts. Like when I would just play in my room, it was like that guy from Police Academy making all those noises with his mouth. That's what I would do. And he would pound on the wall when I would get too loud, because I blare soundtrack music and then have these adventures, and it was just so and then when I was 13 years old, when again, one of Seattle's, I think it was Seattle's first video store, after my bar mitzvah, I just hung out there because I had a lot of bar mitzvah cash, and I would buy tapes because there was no rental industry then. Not really. The way it worked was you'd buy a tape, and it was like $50 or $60, and then you could bring it back after a month and then trade it for $10. There wasn't a rental industry per se yet, and I would just go to this video store and hang out, and the guys that ran the store, they're like, kid, you want a job? Since you're here all the time. And that's how I started working in home video. And it was really weird. By the time I was 16, I was like some old veteran grizzled. And back then I was like a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid who was selling $1,500 VCRs to rich people. And then they would have me go set up because nobody knew how to set up a VCR. It was all foreign. So I would go in and show people, here's the tracking control, and so they could get their tapes not to be snowy. And they would give me like $100 tip. It was a great time to be young and working in home video.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of set me on my way. And it was, I mean, you commented before we went on about all this stuff is just the same stuff I've had since I was a little kid. It just keeps getting better. Like the toys and the things that people make now, they're all amazing.
They are.
It's amazing. And that's why I can't, as a middle-aged man with one foot in his grave, I can't stop getting this stuff because it just keeps getting better.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I've got Transformers from when I was a kid, Voltron, G.I.
Yeah.
Joe. I like you. I had so I had the big aircraft carrier, and this thing took up like the size of
that was
room.
the USS Eagle, right?
The flag.
The flag. That's
The
what
flag.
it was. The flag. USS flag.
And I would have that in my bedroom. And then I would start out in the living room and I'd have my F-14 Tomcat and fly through the Cobra air defense system around the couches, through like the tunnel that was a cardboard box into the hallway. And yeah, you could spend all day doing that.
Dude, that's exactly it. You see those I had the 12-inch G.I. Joe figures, the Adventure Team, which they were the greatest figures ever. And then they went away. They went away in the late 70s. And then G.I. Joe was reborn in the wake of Star Wars as 3 3/4-inch figures. And the vehicles, the G.I. Joe, I never got into because I was a little older. Those G.I. Joe figures, that aircraft carrier was like one of the most, I would look at it and like, I want that. And then like was it the Terrordrome? That shit was so dope. Those figures, those vehicles. I'm like, and I almost got into that stuff. I'm like, I can't, but if I did, I would want to get all of it, and I couldn't, because it was cool. Those figures were awesome. I mean, Cobra was awesome. All the vehicles were awesome. Oh man, they were so good.
See, I couldn't get anything else but G.I. Joe. My dad flew on and off aircraft carriers. He flew S-3A Viking submarine.
Wow.
And
how cool is that?
That awesome. The first time there's a picture of me. He's got me like 3 years old sitting in a jet holding a stick. I think it was an F4 Phantom. And I'm sitting
by the way, the F4 Phantom was my favorite plane growing up. I built so many of those. 1/48 scale, 1/72 scale, 1/24 scale. I had some big, and they made some great models of the F4 where you could take the engines out of the back. Oh, awesome!
Yeah, and almost like you're doing maintenance on them.
Yeah, yes, I had one. It was so great. I built. That was another thing. I loved airplane models. So on my ceiling, between the model rockets and the airplanes, there was probably like 200 aircraft hanging from the ceiling of my bedroom at one point.
Oh, wow.
Because, I loved all that. It was all part of the same thing. Aircraft. And as a matter of fact, speaking of Tomcats, you know what I got this week? Here's a preview of this week's Let's Get Physical Media. I finally got the Top Gun 4K.
4K. Oh, so, yes.
And it was funny when they first, I don't know if the controversy, when they first showed the artwork of this steelbook, they didn't have an F-14 on it. I think it was an F-16. And people were like, bruh. they were like making fun of Paramount going, they didn't fly F-16s in Top Gun. So they did change this artwork to make it the Tomcat. And the Tomcat, of course, with the wings that moved in and out. I mean, come on, what's not to love about the F-14? I still think it might be my favorite aircraft, my favorite jet that has ever been flown by. It supplanted the Phantom as my favorite jet.
Yeah, and the Phoenix missile, that could go like 100 miles after a target. And if you know the F-14, you guys know what I'm talking about. That giant missile it carried underneath the fuselage.
Oh yeah.
With all of that, that's all the stuff I had was G.I. Joe, because it was like, oh, I'll get you G.I. Joe, I'll get you this. If I asked for a Transformer, he looked at me like I was speaking Greek. But if I said that jet is cool and it was G.I. Joe, we got it. If it was a tank,
if you got, the flag, if you're, how cool is it that you're a dad and your kid gets a giant aircraft carrier toy?
And at 15, I floated that. We took it out to the pool in the backyard, and I actually floated it. I wish I hadn't. But
it wasn't watertight, was it?
No, it didn't float. It lasted about 15 seconds and then sunk to the bottom of the pool.
It's okay. It's just water. Yeah.
Oh, but it was things like that. And like you were talking about the way you're into everything. It wasn't just one thing. Star Trek was so big for me because when he would come home from being on deployment, I'd get a month or two with him. And that's what we would do. I would get to stay up late, bonus, and we would watch Star Trek.
Oh yeah. Well, what was really for me the what I've tried to tell people about Star Trek, they're like, when I talk to people about how much I can't stand Star Trek Discovery, everyone's like, well, why don't you just stop watching it?
No.
What people don't understand about that is Star Trek has literally been a part of my life for my entire life. It started before I was born. So when I was growing up and started watching it when I was in strip syndication, because when I started watching Star Trek, there was no more Star Trek. And then there was the animated series, like, oh, there's more Star Trek. And then that was it. And then in the wake of Star Wars, they decided to change the Star Trek phase 2 or whatever television series into Star Trek the Motion Picture. And, you know, I'm 12 years old and there's Star Trek the Motion Picture. Then you had the motion picture series during the 80s. And then when I was in college, Next Generation led to Deep Space Nine. So Star Trek has literally been growing and evolving my entire life. And it wasn't until Star Trek 2009 that it stopped evolving, and they went back and now they reboot Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and Uhura and all this. And in my mind, they did it badly. But in a way, what's unfortunate about that is all of these franchises that continue to, even Doctor Who, the doctors would regenerate, you know, and that's been a franchise that it's older than Star Trek. It would grow and evolve. Star Wars, even that you go back to the prequels, things would change. And now there's this really bizarre with the Disney prequel or sequel Star Wars trilogy and Star Trek starting with 2009. Well, let's go back and try and reinvent. Let's make Kirk, Spock, and McCoy for the modern age. You know, let's go change them. And let's make Star Trek fashionable for today. Like this episode that dropped last night in Discovery, they actually have a character 1,000 years in the future who is a Trill, who is carrying a Trill symbiote who's been men and women for centuries, describes herself as non-binary and to use these pronouns. 1,000 years in the future, and I'm like, the great thing about our favorite franchises is they were classically written, meaning that they were timeless. They did not embrace pop culture references, which immediately date them. And Star Trek Discovery to me is the most, it's already dated when it airs because everything in it we've already seen before. They're not treading any new ground. And what I was explaining, I think I was on the Midnight's Edge podcast, and I said, one of the most objectionable things about modern Star Trek to me is Star Trek has always been about an optimistic future. Even when there's a galaxy-wide Dominion war,
yes,
it was always about really competent people, even in the face of galactic conflict, people that really know their jobs. They're the top 1% of capable human beings. They're out on the front lines and they collectively get along and they can work together for the common good, for this optimistic future. And Star Trek goes 1,000 years into the future with this season of Discovery. And what they could have done was they could have made a future that was so alien to us because, as Arthur C. Clarke said once, that any technology that is any sufficiently advanced technology would appear to be magic to people that didn't know it or didn't understand it. So I thought that we would be going into a future that is sort of way beyond us, where humanity is maybe transcended. We're transhuman at this point. But instead, they went the opposite way. They decided to take the easy route and make a future that was incredibly dystopian, where our characters from the past are going to fix everything. And I think that's weird. It's first of all, why does the future always have to be dystopian? And now there's crime bosses and scrapyards. It's like we're out in the Australian outback with the Lord Humongous looking for oil and gas. It's just weird.
And I watched that episode this morning. We reviewed it this morning. You know, I remember one of the first movies I saw in theaters that I remember was Return of the Jedi, but I also saw Search for Spock and I also saw Voyage Home. When Kirk is explaining the metaphors to Spock. And he's like, that's just the way they talk here. Double dumbass on. He has no idea what he's saying. He
Colorful
has no
metaphors.
Idea. Colorful metaphors. He has no clue, but they know today's lingo, and they know that's STD. It's Star Trek Discovery. They know today's lingo. They know it's they or them. I prefer they or them, and that's it's dated already.
Right. But what's weird also, I was talking about how, in their effort to be look, I have no problem with having all different kinds of people of every shape, size, color, creed to be represented. But what's bizarre is you have to decide, or you have to think like, okay, how would these people be treated 1,000 years from now? And I think all of our weird, petty differences that we have today would change. I mean, if you look at how rapidly our culture changes, think about where we're going to be 1,000 years from now. So you have to extrapolate. If you were to go back 1,000 years and meet somebody from the 10th century, and you brought them forward, they wouldn't know anything. Even if it would be so. And in this day and age, no, we can't. There's a failure of imagination on the part of Star Trek, and I think that's unfortunate.
Well, you had a Trill. You had a Trill in Deep Space Nine. Her name was Dax. They have done this trans idea before. If there's anyone that exemplifies that, it is Dax. But they treat it like it never happened, like it never happened in Star Trek before.
No, and I mean, Avery Brooks calling her old man.
Yeah, I cried when Dax died. I was in tears. I love Dax. She was one of my favorite people on that show. Her and Worf, that wedding. Oh my God, wedding was
well. How about this? How about this? You have a Trill who's been both male and female throughout their lives, marrying a Klingon.
Yeah,
I mean, that is an interspecies, multi-gendered relationship, and they don't make a big deal about it. They're just our characters. You've got Worf and Jadzia Dax, who was many different Daxes, Curzon, and the thing was, it was just matter of fact. But nowadays, to me, it's when you have Adira, who I actually like the actor, and Blue Del Barrio. I think they do a great job, and I like that character. But now they've reduced that character to a trope of the last 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. And it's so interesting that they have to group our first non-binary actor, who's now playing a non-binary character on Star Trek, who now is best friends with Stamets, who's gay. So they've actually segregated these characters in their own little group, which seems odd to me. And
you got to ask why.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, why is that? To me, that is the worst, because really what we have happening now, what I see happening more than I've ever seen it in my life, is that everybody wants to be defined by their tribes and keep everybody apart. One of the things that I learned growing up, when you're reading a lot of science fiction or horror or fantasy, and I had a lot of different friends growing up. I mean, because I was so interested in what I was interested in at a very young age, I was running around Seattle. I was going to film screenings. I was going to art openings. I was doing all kinds of things. So I had a lot of older friends that were very, let's call them, diverse. So I saw all of this kind of thing. And I had friends, LGBTQ friends. I had friends of color, but I never thought of them as LGBTQ or people of color. They were just my friends. And it was, we defined ourselves based on our interests. Like, oh, hey, are you going to see, this foreign film series? Or will I be seeing you at the screening of this? Are we going to go to the Madonna concert? What are we doing? And so are we going to go to this fashion show? Whatever it was. I mean, I had so many diverse groups of friends doing so many different things, and nobody defined themselves by, their sexuality or their color.
No, in Star Trek did it so right in Next Gen, because in The Outcast, when Riker dates Soren.
Soren, yeah.
It's those people that had a problem with it. No one on the crew had a problem with it. No one in Starfleet had a problem with
Right.
it. It was the people, no one cared. It was the people on the planet that had a problem with it.
Yes. And I mean, if you think about it, if you extrapolate on the fact that once you have seen a relationship between Amanda Grayson and Sarek, Spock's parents, you have a human being who is married to an alien and they've had a child together. And there's actually a great 2-part episode of Enterprise, Terra Prime and Demons, when they deal with this kind of thing. Once you have a human being involved in an interspecies relationship, I think you've and this was in the 60s where we met them in Journey to Babel. Talk about progressive.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, and they didn't, this was presented as being matter of fact. And that's why, you know, you look at Dax and what they did in the episode The Host, when you first met the Trills, when Beverly Crusher falls in love with Odan.
Yeah.
And they're doing all these things. Now, back then, because they don't mention it, great science fiction doesn't belabor the point. When you read Ursula K. Le Guin's book, The Left Hand of Darkness, which deals with gender issues, they're not beating you over the head with it. They're saying that, look, humanity is one way, but when we start journeying out amongst the stars and meeting all kinds of different kinds of people, everything that we know about our lives here on Earth is going to be irrevocably changed, because we're going to be dealing with people that are either our equals or better than us, that come from totally alien environments. And this weird idea that we can't even get over the fact that the human race is one species. I mean, if you think about it, people always laugh at the episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, when the people from Charon, who are black on one side and white on the other, and then white on the other, so they're just reversed, even though to us they look exactly the same, but there's racism on Charon. If you go to an alien planet, and we meet aliens, and they come to Earth, and they're like, great, Earthlings, terrific. And we would be trying to tell them, well, yeah, but this person's Asian, this person's black, this person's gay, the aliens would be looking at us going, wait, what? No, you're all part of the human race. You're all Earthlings from Earth. Whatever these differences are, we don't see them. Yeah. I don't know what your problem is. So that was something that I think science fiction taught me, was that there is one race of people on this planet, is the human race. We are very diverse, and there's many differences between all of us, but we all belong. It depends on what country on the planet. I mean, everybody hates somebody. Let's face it, we all do, which is dumb, but we do. And it depends on where you are on the planet. You know, the Sunni and the Shia, the different sects, they hate each other, and I mean, it's so ridiculous. But I thought really that we would be in a much better place. The human race would be in a better place now than we actually are. But
yeah, it's like a deck of cards. Do you really think that the clubs and the spades hate each other and want to kill each other? They're cards. They're all cards. They're all in the same deck. We're all human beings. We're all on the same planet. And like you said, if Star Trek taught us anything, it's that we're all human beings. The IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. But people still want to point their fingers and say, you're the ones who don't understand. You're the ones not accepting of us. You're the ones who don't get it. No, we got it first. We got it years ago. We got it when we were kids. We figured this out when we were kids, that we're all human beings.
Well, yeah, it was the first woman I ever had a crush on was Nichelle Nichols. You know, and I had yet to encounter people that were racist, and that was my first. I don't know. I was probably like 8, and that was the first time I heard the N-word used aloud, and it was in reference to her, because I was explaining to somebody that my biggest crush was Lieutenant Uhura, and that when I saw the episode Mirror Mirror, when she has her exposed midriff, I'm like, oh, that's all good.
Oh yeah.
I'm like 6 or 7 years old, and I'm like, oh, I want that. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. And it never didn't occur to, and I'm like, because to me, Lieutenant Uhura was just the way she was. I thought she was incredibly beautiful, and I loved her voice. You know, I just loved the way she spoke. and her like big green hoop earrings. I love that. And it was such a weird thing for me. You know, it was, and I just didn't get it. I didn't understand. But, you know, as I've gotten older, I have. But we kind of got off topic. You were asking me how I became who I was. I didn't mean to hijack the conversation or push.
No, this is perfect. Everyone here loves Star Trek, and I completely understand what you're saying, because it was the same way for me. I did YouTube before, not this Mornings of Mischief and this insane Valhalla that we've created, but Star Trek. It was very, very Star Trek centered, and we all got together and we all played Star Trek online, and I did promotion videos and we did role plays and all this stuff. And then when I started to point out things in the movies, and I suddenly had fingers pointed at me, and I was called isms and obes, and I'm like, I'm the same person I've always been. I love Star Trek. I love Dax. I love all these characters. I love the stories. I love how the Federation doesn't have these issues anymore. No, but you don't like this and you don't like that, so you must be this. And it completely threw me off. And
well, I've been talking a lot about I think one of the problems that we have is, and I sort of came up with this idea I was talking about on my own show about the authenticity of storytelling. And like, I'm always banging on about authorship, and that I feel that we need, that our franchises now are being governed by corporate interests. And while on one hand, I am not an anti-capitalist by any means. I think that capitalism is a great system. The problem is it's also very easily perverted. Yeah. And capitalism is actually beneficial to most people, but like everything else, greed wrecks it, and dishonesty wrecks it. And that's problematic. And I think that, like, for instance, I've been hearing a lot of my girlfriend, her father escaped from a communist country, and she listens to young people she goes to school with talk about being Marxists. And she's like, my father escaped from that kind of a country. And, I've been listening to people talking about a lot, well, we want the workers to control the means of production. And my first question is like, well, who's going to build those machines? Where does the capital come from to start the means of production? It has to come from somewhere. And that's where capitalism comes in, the creation of wealth and the generation of, and it's a bizarre, to me, we've reached a bizarre place in our culture. And I think people need to start, I used to say everybody should start reading great science fiction, because there's so much material in science fiction. Like if you read William Gibson's Neuromancer in 1984, which describes what the internet culture would turn into, and let's say you decide you had money and you wanted to invest, you could read Neuromancer and go, this book seems to have a lot of interesting things. I should look into the future as an investor and maybe put some money into emerging companies like Apple or Microsoft, because boy, if this book is a precursor to where we're going. And that's one of the things that I find so unique about science fiction is a lot of the great modern science fiction predicted a lot of where our culture is going. Hell, so did Star Trek. I remember having a conversation with my mother about investing money, and she was talking about putting money in oil. And I said, Mom, the Starship Enterprise it's not flown on fossil fuel. It's flown by a central computer, and all this. So computing technology, that's the way to go. And she didn't believe me. So she pulled money out of IBM and put it in oil and lost a lot of money. And I think that I guess as somebody who's always looked toward the future, I find our modern era that we find ourselves in frustrating, because I did see in the last 40 years a lot of cultural change for the better. We were on a pretty good, I'm not saying it was perfect, but our culture was on a pretty good, I went to a college before I went to USC called the Evergreen State College, which is it was a very progressive place. and it was life-changing when I was there in the mid-'80s. But then in 2017, there was a student uprising, and one of the great professors there was run off campus as not being an ally to people of color and all this. And I'm like, first of all, if you're at the Evergreen State College or teaching at the Evergreen State College, it's a pretty good bet that you're pretty much an ally of just about everybody. That's why that university exists. And the idea that now students are demanding safe spaces in academia. I mean, the whole point for me when I went to college was I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to learn things I didn't know. I wanted to be made uncomfortable. I didn't think I knew as much as the professors. The whole point in wanting to go to college is to hear ideas that I'd never heard before. You know, I wanted like Robin Williams and Dead Poets Society to find, you know, at the college level. And the crazy, like if you read Donna Tartt's book, The Secret History, like a Dionysian group of students that had some crazy guru classics professor changing our lives. You know, that's what I thought was gonna happen. And indeed it kind of did. And now the idea that college students make demands of their faculty, I'm like, why would you do that? Why are you even paying to go to school if you think you know more than the faculty does? Yeah. And why do you want a safe space? Why don't you want a space that isn't safe?
Why don't you?
Yeah, why don't you go there, man? I don't want to go someplace that I already know or someplace that's comfortable. You know, drop me behind enemy lines and see if I can make it back. I thought that's what life's kind of all about. But anyway,
that's what it's supposed to be all about.
Yeah, I mean, why be safe? Whoever progressed, whoever made anything of themselves that felt safe. The whole point is that you're unsafe. Life is uncertain. One day you're going to die. And I would much rather, you know, you never know, like in the Nicolas Cage movie, Knowing, when a solar flare is going to suddenly be ejected from our sun and burn off every single living creature on this planet. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. And wouldn't you rather have lived life on the edge and be challenged and do things that was not comfortable for you and triumph in your own life? What do they say in Star Trek? Boldly go.
Yeah.
And that should be the mantra of everyone's life. Boldly go. Go somewhere where you've never been before, whether it's ideologically, whether it's personally, whether it's geographically.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. I started this channel 11 months and 1 day ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I had sat on my butt. I'd wanted to say something, but I'd sat on my butt. I'd been in a motorcycle accident. I'd been down. I had a bunch of upper body work done. I tore both biceps. I was hurting. And I had joined a community, a really good community. You know the guy, his name's Doomcock. I joined his community, and at one point I talked to him and I said, you know, I wanted to get back on YouTube. I wanted to get back and have my voice heard and talk about the things I love about. And he said, go forth, Loki. Go forth and make content. Just make your videos. Don't worry about the gear you've got. Don't worry about what you've got. Just go out there and make your videos and have your voice heard. And he encouraged me. And it was people like you and John Campia, people like Jeremy over at Geeks and Gamers, people like Doomcock, people like Ethan Van Skyver, people like Jeff over at World Class Bullshitters, Midnight's Edge. Those guys that come out here and they take shit. I've taken shit. I get hate mail. You get hate mail. We all get hate mail. We've all taken some crap before, but this is something I wanted to do, and I just had not. I hadn't got up on my feet and done it, and now I'm doing it. And if I'd never taken that opportunity, if I'd never tried to boldly go where I hadn't gone before and actually like talk, because I'd never talked in a video, it was all text and it was music and Star Trek and promos and music videos. I'd never used my voice in any kind of way like this. And if I hadn't have taken that leap, that uncomfortable leap, and just done it, I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to Robert Meyer Burnett, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you know, I mean, like you said, you took that leap. And I found what's very interesting is here's what I found. The people that I have had a conflict with, or like you talking about earlier, being people that have come after me and canceled me, were actually people that I'd worked with.
Yeah.
People that knew me more, which to me was bizarre because I would think that, like, I've always been the same kind of person my whole life. I've been involved or interested in the same things. And what I think, but I have a sense of humor, and it's all over the place. And I delight in other people. Like, my whole life has been about celebrating humanity, mankind. And I've always loved all kinds of people. And anybody who's ever watched my YouTube channel or whatever, or when I've been on with John Schnepp. I was on Collider for 3.5 years. And I think if you watch me for any length of time, it's pretty apparent who I am.
Yeah.
You can follow my work or whatever. And I've never hidden who I am. I've been the same kind of person. Now, do I have an off-color sensibility a lot of the time? Yes, sure. I have a dark sense of humor, but I also, my whole life has been, it's all about delighting in other people, whether it's their creative work or just who they are. And it's so strange to me that only now, over the last couple of years, I've run afoul of people that have tried to portray me, whether it's being a toxic fan, whether it's being a right-wing wingnut racist. I'm like, it's unfortunate because I just assumed, because I've been involved in fan circles for, I've been talking at Comic-Con for 25 years on panels and things like that. And then to have people come after you, and it doesn't matter what you've done, they'll destroy you over one tweet.
Yeah.
And everything that you've done, all the people that you're associated with, or they will come after you, and none of that matters. And what's really interesting is it's almost like, why would you want to destroy people? Like, why would you be put in a position? Why do you feel the need to go after somebody else and want to destroy them? Like, where does that impulse come from? And I feel like I see it around more and more and more. Like, my biggest fear in life is the loss of civility. Like, and that's why some of the movies that scare me the most, or the things that unsettled me, when you have movies like The Hills Have Eyes or Last House on the Left, or like The Strangers, and there are groups of people that lack empathy that will come into your house and torture and kill you, and you're no longer a human being in their eyes. And this happens in real life. I mean, human beings are the worst. And the loss of our civility. I love civilization. I love what we've built. And it's all in it's deeply flawed creation, but it's always getting better. But now I feel like I live in a world of people that want to destroy, like, let's get rid of the patriarchal white cis male Western canon of literature. And that's terrifying to me because, we had defined for hundreds of, well, let's call it tens of thousands of years, we had defined gender roles because that's how we otherwise we wouldn't have survived. Unless we had hunter-gatherer men going out and fighting animals to bring back things to eat, and the women were staying at home caring for the children, we wouldn't be here. So for the majority of human history, our gender roles were really defined, and they were defined by our biology and by, well, the natural world. And as we have, it's only the civilization that we've built that has given us the luxury to start moving outside of those traditional roles and exploring what Western culture and what civilization, well, all civilization has built, whether it's Eastern culture or Western culture. And the fact that people want to just burn down our civilization, and I'm like, okay, well, what are you going to replace it with? We've seen this summer, we had people occupying my hometown of Seattle. We're going to create this autonomous zone. It didn't work out for you. How many people were killed in that autonomous zone? And you wonder, what do you think is going to happen if we suddenly are destroying our own civilization? It's not going to be, there's not going to be something that grows immediately from that. You tear it down. You think you have a new thought. You think that humanity hasn't proven time and time again what works and what doesn't. I hear people talking about socialism. People are like, well, we can't have socialism in this country. Well, there are elements of socialism that are part of this republic that do work. And it's not like if you want to have socialized medicine, that's necessarily a bad thing. The idea that we have a for-profit health system, that's problematic. Yeah. But nobody, you know, these are difficult questions that we have to have. We have to have smart, serious, educated people who are able to look at these things from different perspectives. And we need those things. And I feel that, you know, we're losing that because people want to be very tribal.
And the inventiveness in our society, we are losing the inventiveness. I brought this up the other night. They found a tablet in Egypt, and no one could understand what was on this tablet. No one could decipher it. And this archaeologist handed it off to a friend of his who was a mathematician. And he said, this is how they were building their business or their buildings. So what do you mean that's how they're built? Okay, look, it's all shorthand, complex mathematics that you would need a computer to figure out today.
Right.
And this is the kind of stuff we're not teaching. We're not teaching any of this. It has to be one way. It has to be this way. It has to be this way for everyone. And the inventiveness in our society is honestly, we're losing that because of that.
Well, I mean, also, you know, it's our competitive spirit and our egos and things that we have to push forward. What people have to understand is the universe is indifferent to your suffering. You know, the universe does not care, and your life should be important to you. Yeah. And I find it so interesting that so much of our modern day, especially on social media and all this, is about people telling other people what they should or shouldn't believe. And I'll tell you something. What I have learned, if you get 5 or 10 people together to complete a task, whether it's make a movie or build a house or start a business or whatever, I find that it doesn't matter what that task is. The diversity of thought, the different kinds of people that you can get together, it's not about skin color. No. What it's about is what the experience of the world is like for a person who does grow up as, say, if they're Black in America or Asian in America. It's that different perspective, what they have experienced, that gives them a unique perspective that I don't have. So when we get together to do something, to create something, it is better to have diversity of thought, because you need those perspectives to help you build something that's going to survive.
Yes.
And this idea that we only want to hear one voice. No, you got to hear all voices. All voices will help you build something that are stronger. So I'm a huge fan of the fact that you get marginalized people or people that haven't had a voice. We not only is it important to hear their voices, but we need their voices, because it's that kind of diversity that's going to strengthen our entire civilization. But the thing is, we all have to do it together. You can't trade. I've always said you can't trade one oppression for another. We have to move forward together. Otherwise, you're just going to wind up repeating the same cycle of destruction, or call it what you will, that we've been fighting for so long.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. To me, diversity is strength. Diversity of voice is strength. And that's why it's important to rise. People need to be given a voice. But now what's so weird is everybody wants to tell everybody else, well, you have to hear something this way. You have to be this way, or you're not an ally. Well, the people that start saying those things, those are the most dangerous people.
Yes.
Those are the people that are building walls and being divisive, and they need to read some science fiction is what they need to do. They need to
No,
read some science fiction.
I completely agree. And the writer's room, I that's one of the things I talk about all the time when you look into some of these writer rooms. It's, well, we all came from here. No, you don't want to write a room full of all people that came from the same place. It's like Gene and DC Fontana. The reason why Star Trek was so good, the original series, because you had both of them, not because you had one or the other, but it was both of them.
Well, and also the fact that Gene allowed DC Fontana, recognized her talent. You know, she wasn't necessarily going to be writing on Star Trek. And she was given an opportunity and wrote, I mean, she defined the Vulcans. And I think they did a lot of great work, and that was something that Gene Roddenberry, allowed for. And another thing is, it's an evolutionary process. Like, everybody wants the world to be perfect right now, at this moment. But you've got to give it time to grow and evolve, and have faith that eventually bad ideas are going to be stamped out. And we were doing a pretty good job of it. Were we doing it as fast as some people? No, but look at the last 60 years of progress in America. I mean, things like the civil rights movement, Stonewall, women's rights, women's liberation, all the ERA. I mean, all of these things. It has changed, and it has been moving forward. I feel that the last 10 years we've been a little stagnant. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you want to go back to my career and talk more about fandom and stuff like that, but we can do that too.
Yes, I would love to do that. I would love. How did you get your first? How did you dip your toes into that? How did you get into the world of Hollywood? I know that you've done Star Trek, but how did all that happen?
Well, one of the things that I was also doing as a kid was I was making movies, Super 8 movies. I was shooting Super 8 films. So I've sort of got my handle on it's like anything else. If you want to write, you have to have an understanding of language, of the structure of language. How does language work? And I think once you start picking up a camera and coming up with like coverage, like trying to shoot a conversation between two people and learning the language of cinema, it's a long process, but that was something I needed to do. And I was making movies. I always wanted to come to LA. That was always my goal, to get involved in the film business, but I had no idea how to do it. I really didn't have any way in, but people knew I was so into my interests, and I came down here to go to USC, and I knew a woman who I kind of grew up with. She was a girl I went to school with, junior high and high school, was her mom, who was like my second mom. And she came to LA and fell into production. And she called me up one day and she says, "Hey, I just finished up college. And she says, would you like to come work on this movie as in the art department?" And I'm like, I don't know anything about that. I was going to film school and studying movies, but love watching movies and talking about movies and studying movies and writing about movies is nothing like working on a movie. You think but you really don't know. And she said, well, I was like, what movie is it? And she's like, it's Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Not the one with Matthew McConaughey or Renee Zellweger. That came later. This one had Matthew McConaughey and Ken Foray from Dawn of the Dead in it. And I'm like, oh my God. So I came on board as the art department production assistant. And so here, I've just done this. I've talked about this before, but like my first day on the job was they gave me a list of things to buy and $10,000 in cash. and they said, don't come back until you have everything on this list. And one of the things that was on the list was I had to find "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. And I'm like, well, I'm in California. Like we're in Valencia. Where am I going to find "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers? Well, they didn't want me to ask. It was a test. They're like, go find these things. So I'm like, where would you possibly buy "Don't Mess"? And I figured maybe a truck stop.
Gas station, yeah.
Gas station, but I figured a truck stop, you'd have to have a place where there were people that had interstate travel. So a truck stop would be a place where truckers who were going all over the country would be. So I found a really big truck stop that was like 20 miles away from our production office. And I drove there, and not only did they have the bumper stickers, they had like 3 or 4, 5, I don't remember, different kinds. So I just bought them all. And this is pre-internet, there's no, now you could just search, don't mess with Texas bumper stickers. Where'd you get them? But back then there wasn't. And so I come back with everything that they asked me to buy. And they said, okay, kid, you can come back tomorrow. So
that is awesome.
It was amazing. And then once you get into Hollywood, and I've said this to people in the entertainment business, work begets work. So if you do a good job, there are two things that if you want a Hollywood career, I think that I could say to people. One, people have to like you. It really is what you know and who you know. And working in Hollywood is an incredibly social business. You're talking to people all the time, and your demeanor and how you treat people and how you are as a person is hugely important. And you have to be creative, and you have to work well with others. And so when I was a kid, I was like this eager beaver. And then the second thing is you have to be good at what you do. People like working with people that are talented, and they know what they're doing, and they're personable, and they're easy to work with. And there's so much money involved. Once people can trust you on that level, then your career will start to take off. And that was kind of what happened to me. I bounced around at doing all these different things. And usually I could ingratiate myself to people because I genuinely like people. And then I would try and bring in enthusiasm. You still have to be good at what you do. Yeah. But that's kind of how it started. And my idea when I got out of film school was I understood that my first 3 or 4 or 5 years was going to basically be getting coffee for people. Like I had no illusions that I'm going to go be Orson Welles at 24. That was never going to happen. So my attitude was I would shut up and just watch and do what was expected of me and learn everything that I could learn. And that was sort of that was what I was doing. That was my job. And I learned, it was great. I had the best time in the world. And I went from place to place to place. And I was very lucky. Like after I did that, I had an opportunity to get a job at Warner Brothers. And it was to work as a management trainee. It was called a management trainee. It was a new position that was started by who was at the time the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers, Bill Young. And he started this new position. And what he wanted to do is bring young people in and show them how to sort of be the liaison between the studio production office and when a movie is made, it's like you're starting a company. Each movie is a new company. So it has usually its own LLC. It's its own production entity. So even though Warner Brothers might be making 5 movies, each movie is its own entity. And there's a go-between between the actual studio, our department, which was physical production. We oversaw the day-to-day production of motion pictures, and then the actual company that's making the films. So there's a separate production office that is only in charge of making whatever movie they're making. And then that production office is overseen by the studio. So Bill Young wanted to make it easier. So he wanted us to learn that. So maybe we could go off and we could be unit production managers, or we could be somebody that would then go oversee these offices. And then we would have a better idea of being able to work with a studio. And that was the first place. That was my first big job. And I was on the Warner Brothers lot. And it was an incredible time to be 22 years old and working in movies, because I was on the Warner lot when they were making it was incredible. I mean, we were making 15 movies a year. I worked on everything from Doc Hollywood to Bonfire of the Vanities to The Rookie to Lethal Weapon 3. I mean, there was just all the movies that Warner Brothers made in the early 90s. It was incredible. It was incredible.
And you were right there and right in the middle of it. And
right in the middle of it. I mean, so my job a lot of the time was just pushing papers around. So I would have to get, like, every movie that's made every day has a production report that talks about what was done that day. And then there's a call sheet for tomorrow. And a call sheet is everybody that's working and then what they're shooting and where they're at. So there was three of us, three management trainees, and we each worked underneath a unit. So there's my boss, Bill Young, and then there were three executive production managers that would split up the movies. And like each person had 5 movies. So I worked for one guy named Kurt Newman, whose father actually directed Rocket Ship XM and the original The Fly.
Oh,
so
wow.
So what I would do is I had like 5 movies, and like one of my movies was this movie called Joe versus the Volcano.
Yes.
It starred Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. So like when they were shooting like on stage 16, I would go down to every day to set. That was when they were shooting that. It was a giant water tank there. So there was a storm sequence in that movie, and I met, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. I walk in and I'm supposed to be there. So when you're on a movie set, when you're working on a movie set, everybody's kind of equal. I mean, yeah, there are stars that go to their trailers or whatever, but the crew, and even like myself, a little punk kid walking in, that's the only time in my life, first and only time I actually met Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, and they were delightful. They gave me the time of day. They talked to me, because I'm working at the studio, so it was I was there for 2 years. It was amazing. It was amazing time.
Do you have any advice? I know there are a couple of people in here right now. Adega Outlaw is a writer. He just got connected to a publishing company. He does already have a book out, Evolution. Extremely, extremely cool book. We've got Kai. We've got a couple of people in here that are just either pushing into writing and actually having their work published, or they have been successful. What would you give like the best advice you could give for someone wanting to get into an industry like yours?
Well, first of all, it is the best advice I ever heard is that it takes 10 years to become an overnight success in Hollywood. and I think that's true. And I've seen so many people come into this business and everybody wants success immediately. And I'll tell you, one of the things, like if you think about people like Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, that book was self-published, and then it was later discovered. The one thing that we have in this day and age that I didn't have growing up is platforms like this. The fact that you can make anything you want. You can make a short film, put it on YouTube. You never know if it's going to be discovered. You can promote your own movies. Like Ethan Van Sciver is a really good example of what Comicsgate led to in terms of going to crowdfunding and being able to make your own books. Because the idea is there's still this idea that, look, would I like to make a studio movie? Hell yes, I would. But we live in a landscape. What happened today with Warner Brothers is one of the most significant sea changes in the motion picture industry, maybe ever. With Warner Brothers saying our entire 2021 slate, including Dune and The Matrix 4, are going to debut both on HBO Max and go to movie theaters on the same day.
My wrench, Chris Persia, just dropped that in the chat just before we went live. And I was like, that's insane. That's insane.
It's insane. It's insane, and it changes the business forever. And craziness. And I think that now, but it also is an opportunity because, sure, people need Ethan Van Sciver before he was crowdfunding his own comics. He was Ethan Van Sciver, and he had quite a career at the Big Two and mainstream comics and all that. People knew who he was. But by going off and crowdfunding, it made it viable. Or look what Boom Studios did. They're working with Keanu Reeves and they're crowdfunding a book. So the traditional idea, I think it's so hard now to break into, like, if you want to publish a book, to get a publisher. There's so many rules. Everybody thinks, well, you have to have, it's got to be 25,000 words, and it has to be this, or it has to be that, or we only want things like this. It's like, why put up with that? You know, why not if you've got the means to make, and it might take a while. It really depends what you want. Do you want to be a writer or do you want to become rich and famous? Because you have to decide what it is you want to do. Like I for YouTube, to me, there's a lot of YouTubers, people are getting really, really rich on YouTube. But when I went and started my own YouTube channel, I'm like, you know, if I could make enough money to like pay the power bill and pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
If I could do that with YouTube, then it would free me up to pursue other goals, you know, other things I wanted to do. And even like things like I'm running the first Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival on my channel. If YouTube can allow me the opportunity to go do more things like that, like generate creativity of others. I mean, I've been getting films from all over the world. There's a lot of creativity out there. I would love to do that, you know, inspire more people. I'm having a short story contest now. I'm going to go publish a book, everybody that's written a short story. So now that the film festival that I was running is closed, the next thing I'm doing is I'm having a short story contest. And I call my audience imagination connoisseurs. So I'm going to publish using proceeds I get from the festival itself by people paying an entry fee or whatever. I'm going to publish a book of those best stories called The Imagination Connoisseurs. Like, I don't even know what I made up that term. I just figured people that like, as an alternative for geeks, the word geeks or nerds or whatever, people that like science fiction, fantasy, or horror, or comics, or music, or whatever, those are people that love the imagination and the products of the imagination. So I figured, like wine connoisseurs, my audience are imagination connoisseurs. You know, they want to talk about Marvel movies, they can, and they can talk about them in a way that a wine connoisseur would talk about wine. And so I figured I want to define that. So I figured, okay, I'm going to publish an anthology of stories called The Imagination Connoisseurs. So right now through February 14th, I'm running a short story contest. The stories have to be between 5,000 and 10,000 words. And I'm going to pick the best ones. I'm going to put them in a book and I'm going to publish that book. And then I'm going to pick one of those stories and I'm going to turn it into a short film. So between March 1st and May 15th, which is my birthday, for 2.5 months, I'm going to make a short film out of somebody's story. And then I'm going to make the journey of that short film part of my YouTube channel, where I'm going to take everybody through the how that works. How do you make a film? And then hopefully if somebody likes that, maybe I'll be able to go get funding and go make other short stories that are in the book into short films and put them either on my YouTube channel or sell them to Netflix or something. Because why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not? And that is the first thing, because I was encouraged to do this, because I had someone back me up and say, no, you should go forth, young one, and make content. It is my duty to pay that forward to the people around me.
I agree with you 100%. And, you know, everybody has different levels of creativity. And I think the real question is, and I've seen this a lot. People come to Hollywood because they want to get rich, they want to get famous, they want to sleep with beautiful people, whatever it is that they want. The problem with that is they quickly realize in order to do that, there is a lot of hard work involved.
Yes.
I mean, one of my people that I've always sort of looked up to their stories is Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever you want to call him. He started producing records when he was 14 years old. I mean, he's obviously incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful, but he's a self-made guy.
Yep.
You know, and he started when he was really young. And I think that one of the problems with the modern age is we look to a lot of people, a lot of influencers, whether it's the Kardashians being one, or pick your favorite rich YouTube influencer or whatever, or Instagram person. Everybody thinks they're going to get rich and successful that way. But even the people that are, as you know, YouTube is a fucking job.
Yeah.
Like it's a slog. You got to promote your channel. It's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week thing. And it becomes a job. Like there's a lot of people that have accused me. They're like, oh, you're out there on the internet begging for money. And I'm like, no, I'm creating content. And if this were a TV station, I'd be getting paid to make things.
That's right.
You know, and like I'm doing this show about physical media. The show I do about physical media is a pre-recorded show. So I have to edit that show. There's editorial and there's overlays and graphics and things that I have to go get. So there is work involved. And so to do that show, it probably takes me a total of, well, let's just say 8 hours. So between shooting the show and editing that show, how much is my time worth? As a professional editor who I have a feature film that I produce coming out called Tango Shalom, which starts its festival run in February. How much is my work worth? Now, Let's Get Physical Media is a new show. I mean, I'm happy if it gets 1,500 views. Well, as you know, on YouTube, that's nothing, especially for a show that I'm putting that much effort into. Why not just do a live show? But I kind of have fun doing it. And am I going to get rich off doing Let's Get Physical Media? Probably not. And I'm not even going to get a lot of ad revenue from it. But I just enjoy doing it.
And that's yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is the point. The people that are looking at this like, oh, I can do this. I can get rich on YouTube. I do 8 to 10 shows a week. 8 to 10 shows a week. There is planning. There is talking. There is networking. There is creating thumbnails, creating, like you said, overlays. You put your thoughts and your ideas. You're talking to other people. You're getting groups together. You're getting a panel together. It is not, I am just going to jump into this and I'm just going to do it. And you spend an hour a day. No, that is not. This is a job. I wake up in the morning. I set up my show. I'm getting ready to do my show. If I have another show later that day, I'm working on that. I'm working on an intro. I'm working on rendering a new graphic for the intros or the outros. You're always doing something. So when he says you wake up and you go to bed and that you've worked all day, that is what I do all day. And a community that we have, Valhalla, I am always being watchful and making sure people are having a good time and people are able to enjoy themselves and talk about the things they want to talk about without anyone trying to pull any BS. That it's like a baby you're taking care of. The channel's the baby, the community's you're trying to raise that and grow it and make it what it needs to be. And it's work. There is no.
Well, I mean, what you just described as well, one of the things that it never really occurred to me, because when I did Collider Heroes or the John Campea show, I would show up, like John and I used to be in the studio together. I would just show up, and John Schnepp, certainly, I'd go to the Collider studios. I'd show up, I would do the show, and I would leave. I never even watched our shows. So I was very unaware of the community of our viewers.
Yeah.
And one of the things that surprised me the most about starting my own YouTube show is this community that has developed around the show. And I've been blown away. I've been blown away by the people that write to me, the stories that people have told, and the fact that we do, for me, it's fun to have like catchphrases and the post geek singularity community and imagination. I love all that. I guess it's because of I love branding and things like that. But the people that I've met and the fans and also the community itself has constantly amazed me. And like this film festival that I've been doing, I'll be putting up new films for the next 15 days. I'm going to end up having 70 plus movies to show. And they're all over the place in terms of quality and in terms of ambition, but I've just been blown away by the creativity, and that whole idea of a film festival was really, it was sort of born out of there were two viewers. There was a guy named B.L. Alley, who's a novelist, and there was Patrick Keller and Dieter Bastian, who I'm doing Let's Get Physical Media with. And B.L. Alley used to make these videos that were kind of making fun of my various shows, but they were really funny. They were really clever. and he has a very dry, sort of a droll sense of humor, and I would play them. And then Dieter and Patrick just made this movie for fun on the weekend this movie called The Secret Exchange. It was about Hot Toys figures, and I thought it was funny. You know, I played it, and I'm like, you know, what if I had a film festival? And between what BL Ali was doing, these funny videos making fun of me, and then what Dieter and Patrick Keller did in Saarbrücken, Deutschland, the fact that they did that, I was like, I wonder how many people out there would make movies. So I just kind of, on a live show, I'm like, we should have a film festival. That's all it was. I just thought it up. And like, okay. So then I'm like, well, I gotta have rules for a film festival. And then I realized, well, this is going to be a shit ton of work for me because I have to process the films and graphics and watch them. And so I have to charge an entry fee just because there's work involved. And then I was like, I wonder if anybody will show up. I first had a poster contest. I got over 60 entries. And suddenly the community is being involved and engaged. I've been a little disappointed in how many people are watching the movies, but I'd like to get more of the word out. But to me, it showed that it was possible. And I realized, you know what? I'm just going to keep having contests so other people can share their creativity. Mike Bodden, who sort of my partner on the channel, he came up with a really interesting idea yesterday. He goes, what if we did this? And I'm like, that's a really good idea. So that'll be like the next contest that we're going to launch. But it's the community and the people that have made this so great.
Yeah, we had a Valhalla member that worked in the food industry. I won't say exactly what he did because I'm not going to call him out on live, but he lost his job. And I tell you what, Rob, within a day, he had multiple people sending him job ads for around his area and around the states he could go because he travels a lot. So it was like in a day, there was like 100 possibilities there in front of him in a day. And I was like, I love this community. I love the people in this community that are immediately there for someone. They've never met this man. They've never shook his hand. They might have talked to him over a computer, but they've never met him. And boom, 100 possibilities in a day.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And I'll tell you, we have this sort of like, for instance, I have been criticized because I've talked to people that are part of the fandom menace.
Yeah.
You know, people have said to me, and like, I can't believe you're going to go on with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers. He's this person. And I have to tell you, I admire what Jeremy is doing. Do we differ politically? Absolutely. But when I went on his channel, he couldn't have been nicer. We had the greatest discussion. And my thought was that Jeremy's a fan as much as I am a fan. He has differing ideology than I do. But it showed that he and I, as men, he's a father. He runs his own network. He has people that rely on what he's doing. He's got a network of people that work underneath what they're doing over Geeks and Gamers. And I was like, why is it that all the pushback that I've been getting are from people that are supposed to be on my side of the aisle?
Yeah.
And yet all the people at Midnight's Edge, whether it's, Doomcock, or I've never been on with Ethan Van Sciver or anything like that, but I've only met people that I've had a great experience with. And my whole idea, my whole purpose is to be able to talk to everybody. Look, do I want to talk to Nazis? Fuck Nazis. No, I don't. But within the fan community, we all are bonded together by a love of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and comic books and video games and whatever it is, flights of fancy, call it. Imagination connoisseurs, that's what we are.
Yeah.
And we live in the post-geek singularity where all of our crazy, weird, niche interests have exploded, and now they've gone mainstream. So that's why I say post-geek singularity. It's great. And why should we be hating each other? Look, if I want to be critical of Star Trek Discovery, that doesn't mean I hate Star Trek.
That's right.
It does mean I fucking hate mediocrity, and I can't stand what's happening to the franchise that I've loved. But that said, there are people whose first experience with Star Trek is going to be with Star Trek Discovery. And I'm the first person to say that, look, I would love to have a conversation with you about these things. I am not going to tell you that you're an idiot for liking something I don't like, because I recognize that there's a lot of people that never watched Star Trek. You know, Tom over at Midnight's Edge had never watched a James Bond movie. And we did a stream before I came on this stream where we're going through the journey of the Bond films, and he's talking about him. It's a lot of fun. Now, I if he doesn't like a certain Bond movie, like he didn't like Dr. No that much.
Yeah, I was about to say that because I was actually listening to that stream.
Yeah, and I think, but why? That's okay, because he's coming to the Bond franchise for the first time, and the Bond franchise is wildly diverse. And as we move through the years, and there's a lot of good Bond films, but there's a lot of mediocre Bond films.
There are.
And I think that for me to say to Tom, how can you not like Dr. No? Well, that's not fair. It's because you can like whatever you want. You can like what you want and dislike what you want. That doesn't mean you're wrong. And I think that's what an intelligent, educated, enlightened society does. We realize that we're all different kinds of people. We all like certain things and don't like other things. Where I draw the line is where people want to tell you what you should like or what you shouldn't like. And I don't call that gatekeeping, because nobody is keeping me from liking. Look, I like a lot of things that I know are demonstrably not good. And I'll admit it, but I love them anyway.
Yep.
I love them anyway. And I'll say that I know this isn't good, but I love it for what it is. You know, as an example, Fritz Kirsch, who directed the original Children of the Corn, made this movie in the mid-'80s called Tough Turf that stars Robert Downey Jr. and James Spader and Kim Richards, who used to be from Escape to Witch Mountain. Now she's known as one of the housewives of Beverly Hills. It is not a good movie. It's like a 50s gang movie transposed to the 80s. It's goofy. I love it. I love it. I would never try and convince somebody that, oh my God, this is one of the great teen films of the 80s. No, I don't know if it's particularly good. It's probably not, but I love it. And now if someone came to me and said, oh, well, you know, how can we respect your opinion if you like such trash? I'm like, no, I have a good opinion. I know it's good. It's just that I take things in the spirit that they're meant. You know, Tough Turf. The movie's called Tough Turf. TUFFTURF. I mean, that in itself is ridiculous. But I will stand by my love of that movie. Does that mean my love of, say, The Godfather or Clockwork Orange or, you know, Gone with the Wind or Citizen Kane or Lawrence of Arabia, that my love of those movies is somehow negated by my love of Tough Turf? No, because I love Tough Turf on its own terms. Tough Turf is not going, well, you know, I'm better than Lawrence of Arabia. It's not doing that. Tough Turf was only trying to be Tough Turf, so I can love it for that reason.
Yes, and you brought up Jeremy at Geeks and Gamers, and that's the exact same thing. Jeremy was the guy who called me Stone_Loki. He never called me Stone Loki. Everybody knows me as Stone Loki, but he called me Stone_Loki. And anytime I ever talk to Jeremy keeps it real. He keeps his opinion real. He tells it the way he sees it. That's the way he does things. And I will always respect him for that. He came out with a video that said he loved what Rian Johnson was going to do with The Last Jedi. He saw that preview and he was like, I can't wait. Rian Johnson's a genius. And then he saw it and his opinion changed. And he was honest about that opinion. He didn't keep backing something up that he once thought was going to be great when his opinion changed.
Right.
He's honest. You're honest. We try to be honest, and it's the pushback for that. Like you said, I love Star Trek, but I can't stand what they've done with Star Trek Discovery and Picard. I don't like them. And when people tell me, why are you even watching it then, Loki? Because I loved Star Trek. I grew up watching it. Just like you said, Rob. Just like you said, I grew up watching it. I grew up experiencing it. It's something I shared with my dad. It's something I shared all the course of my life.
Yeah, and you can't. The thing about Star Trek for me is I'm also interested in it from a cultural standpoint, not just my own personal interest in Star Trek, but Star Trek is a franchise that has been around and reflecting our society since 1966.
Yes.
So to suddenly decide, well, you don't like it anymore, why aren't you watching it? Well, to me, one of the things that I find interesting about Star Trek Discovery, the modern era of Star Trek, up until the end of 2005 with Enterprise, even Enterprise had its DNA back with Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry, because a lot of Rick Berman, the executive producer of Enterprise, the creator of Enterprise, worked with Roddenberry creating Next Generation. So the entire Berman era of Star Trek, for better or for worse, had Roddenberry's DNA in it. And so the first Star Trek that came out after Roddenberry's DNA was gone from the franchise was, in fact, the Bad Robot Secret Hideout era of Star Trek. And I'm always amazed when I was watching, if you watch the clip of J.J. Abrams on the Jon Stewart show, when he says, I never liked Star Trek growing up. And I'm like, why would you then make a Star Trek movie?
Yeah.
And it fascinated me that J.J. Abrams had no real affinity for Star Trek, but yet, and of course, it's a job. You know, they looked at it, Bad Robot looked at Star Trek, they're like, here is a multimedia franchise that has existed as TV shows and movies. And if we could get our claws into it, we could make video games. And this could be an incredibly lucrative franchise between toys and movies and TV shows and all of these different things. We could make a ton of money. So I want to get involved with that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I understand, but it didn't work out that way for them because they thought they were going to throw their weight around and realize, well, we can control the merchandising. And what they tried to do was get rid of classic Star Trek, and they wanted only their product to be merchandised. And CBS was like, we're not going to do that. You know, and when they realized that, they even like abandoned the Star Trek video game that was made for the 2009 movie. There's a really interesting story about how basically Bad Robot abandoned that. They even blamed they when the movie the video game came out, it wasn't that great. They blamed other people, and it's just a very interesting. I mean, Hollywood it ain't show friends, it's show business.
No,
and I just think that what's happened is you have creators making TV shows is very lucrative, and they have a whole franchise. Secret Hideout now is doing with Star Trek what Bad Robot wanted to do. Now they've got multiple shows across multiple. We'll do a kids show with Star Trek Prodigy. We'll do an animated show with Star Trek Lower Decks. Then we'll do Picard, Discovery. They're going to send Michelle Yeoh back to the 23rd century. So they're going to do Section 31 in the next two-parter with a Guardian of Forever, which they've now adopted. Yeah, which they've now adopted. The Guardian of Forever, they've put the Harlan Ellison spin back to it, where the Guardian of Forever is a guy, is a person. I know, you'll see. But they're doing all of that, and it's the problem is even the writers, the way the television is written, they've got these writers that have worked on these various shows, but none of them necessarily have an affinity other than Kirsten Beyer for Star Trek. And the series is today's episode, or this week's episode, it was all over the place. This A plot, it was the most murky. I'm like, what's going on here exactly?
Yeah.
You know, there's this crime boss. Like, you're asking me to believe that in the 30th century that you've got scrap yards and crime bosses, and we've got transporter technology. Why are there scrap yards? Why would you not beam scrap metal into a matter repository where it's kept until you need it? It isn't the 20th century anymore. You know, we don't have foundries, but whatever.
So I don't want to keep you too long because I know your time is important to you. But my Mexican Iron Man will kill me if I do not ask you this question. Hills Run Red, time of your life?
Oh, it was fantastic. So here's how that happened. Here's how Hills Run Red got made. Now, first of all, I have to say that at that point, I'd started my own company, Ludovico Technique, which is a reference to Clockwork Orange. I started Ludovico Technique to produce special features for DVDs at the time. And the first movies I did was X-Men and X-Men 2. Because I had been friends with Bryan Singer since film school. We'd known each other since, college. And the original X-Men DVD did not have very many special features, and I had started working for this company called Curdy Peller, and I was working on Disney movies and Lord of the Rings, doing special features. And Brian, I actually, how it came about was I did this, The Usual Suspects. I did the special features for a re-release of The Usual Suspects, and it went really well, and Brian really liked what I was doing. So then he calls up and he says, would you do X-Men? They're going to re-release X-Men, so you'd be working on X-Men and X-Men 2. And I'm like, hell yeah. So now I'm doing the special features for X-Men while I had a day job. So I'm working for this company on Lord of the Rings, but even my boss at that company said, I don't want to work on Usual Suspects or the X-Men movies. Why don't you start your own company? So I started my own company as like a hobby. So now I'm making special features. And that rolled, it went pretty great. I went from Lord of the Rings to Chronicles of Narnia on my new company. So I left my old company and I went to New Zealand for 14 months to work on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Then my team jumped over to Australia to work on Superman Returns. And the whole point was, as I was making more and more and more money, I've set up an office space and I wanted to produce movies. My idea was to produce and direct movies because this was after I made Free Enterprise. And so all of the people that I met on Superman Returns at the studio, like Diane Nelson, who was head of global brand management, she got promoted and became head of Warner Premiere, which was their direct-to-video line. So they were making the DC animated movies, and then they were making sequels to movies that Warner, like direct-to-video sequels, like the Lost Boys sequels, like the Lost Boys, The Tribe, low-budget sequels to their bigger titles. So I now have my DVD production company, and I'm doing all this work. And this company from New York that I didn't know, Fever Dreams, they knew a mutual friend of mine, so they came to visit me, and they're like, look, we're not happy with they were making $350,000 horror movies. They made a movie with Tony Todd called Shadow Dead Riot. And they're like, we want to up our game. So we like Free Enterprise. We like what you're doing. Would you take a look at these two scripts? And they had a movie called Wicked Lake and an idea called The Hills Run Red. Now, Dave Parker and I, who were working together, I'd known him from the early 90s at Full Moon. He was at my company working on Superman Returns, and we're looking at this stuff, and like The Hills Run Red was kind of a self-reflexive slasher movie. And they're like, we want to make this movie for $350,000, but we want it to be better. So what can you guys do? And so long story short, I'm like, okay, well, I'd like to make both of these movies and use the same crew. I'll direct one and Dave directs the other. Well, that was a little uncomfortable. That was a little too ambitious for this company. And they're like, well, no, pick one. So I'm like, okay, I've always wanted to produce a movie on my own. So I would like to produce The Hills Run Red, and Dave is going to direct it. But they wanted me to direct because of Free Enterprise. And I go, yeah, but Dave Parker has a real feel for this. And he's got a real great take on Babyface. And we'll get our mutual friend Dave Scow, who is a screenwriter. He wrote the movie The Crow. And the last thing he wrote was, I think he wrote an episode on the new season of Creepshow, the new Creepshow series that's on Shudder. But he was also a novelist. And they're like, you can get Dave. I'd met him on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, my first job when I was a PA. And they're like, you can get Dave Scow to write it. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how can you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll just call him up and ask him. We got to pay him. And they're like, crazy. But they didn't know if Dave Parker was going to be the right guy. And they wanted to see if I could produce something. So they're like, we want you guys to make a proof of concept short about how you see The Hills Run Red, which is like a trailer, a proof of concept trailer, which a lot of people do now. And we're like, okay. So we did. Dave designed this trailer, and we used all the equipment I had at work. We made animatics, and we showed the animatics and the storyboards to a visual effects, a makeup effects company. So we actually shot this teaser trailer for one day on Hollywood Boulevard. And Bryan Singer even came down and visited the set. Like what you guys are doing. And then so we finished this trailer, and Bryan saw it, and we had it, and we were going to make this movie for $350,000. And then I'm actually having lunch with Bryan one day, and he goes, Rob, why are you wasting your time making a $350,000 movie? You're not going to make any money on that. And I said, I know, but I get to produce a movie and someone else is giving me the money. And he's like, yeah, but why don't you go make it at Warner Brothers? I'm like, oh yeah, okay, bruh. I'll just knock on the door at Warner Brothers and go, hey, Warner Brothers, Bryan Singer says I should come make The Hills Run Red here. I mean, what, the police will come and take me away. And literally that happened. And we're sitting at lunch. Brian calls up Diane Nelson on the phone, who's now the president of Warner Premiere, who I'd work with. So she knew who I was, because I had done all these corporate branding videos on Superman. I didn't just do the DVD stuff. I worked like when they make a movie, when there's corporate sponsors like Pepsi, for instance. If someone's drinking a Pepsi in the movie, they're supporting them. So I had to make all these crazy videos that Brian and I on the set of Superman Returns made, these corporate videos that we took it to a whole new level. It was hilarious what we did. It was hilarious. And so Diane liked me, and Brian said, "Hey, Rob Burnett has this thing, and maybe you should see it and take a look." So Dave Parker and I, the director of the trailer, and later the director of The Hills Run Red, we take this trailer and we take the new script that Dave Scow had written into Warner Brothers for a meeting. And, this is crazy that this is happening. And yes, part of it was because Brian made the phone call, but it was based on, 10 years of previous work and knowing Brian since before he even made Public Access, his first movie. And so it's Dave and I going. Brian didn't come with us. It was just Dave and I. We show the trailer. They're like, wow, there was another executive named Matt Bierman there. And Matt Bierman's like, wow, that's pretty savage. That looks great. I want to see that movie. And I said, okay, well, if you like the trailer, here's the script. And they called us back 2 weeks later, and they're like, we want to make the movie. And we're like going, no way.
Yeah.
And they what they were doing then, they had a program with Silver Pictures, Joel Silver, who made Lethal Weapon and Predator and Die Hard and all these movies. Their company was on the Warner lot, and they had Dark Castle Entertainment, and they had made like Gothica and Orphan, and that was their horror division. Well, Joel Silver had Dark Castle was going to do 10 direct-to-video movies for Warner Premiere, and the first one was Return to the House on Haunted Hill, and they were finishing up that, and they said, we want The Hills Run Red to be the second movie of this series.
Oh, wow.
And the movie that was going to follow us was a movie called Cheerleaders in Trouble, which would have been great. And so we ended up, they're like, well, should we shoot this movie in South Africa or Bulgaria? And I'm like, well, it's set in the United States. They're like, yeah, but we can get a lot more bang for our buck if we go make it in South Africa or Bulgaria. They decided to make it in Bulgaria, which brought a whole slew of problems because nothing in Bulgaria looks like the United States. Everything is in Cyrillic. The streets nothing looks the same. But it worked out. So there we found ourselves making The Hills Run Red in Bulgaria. And if I might give a shameless plug, this year in January, The Hills Run Red came out in 2009, but Scream Factory picked up The Hills Run Red to release, and it had never had a high definition release. It never had come out on Blu-ray. So Dave Parker, the director, and I, we went back and did 6.5 hours of new special features. 6.5 hours for a movie that's 83 minutes long.
That's amazing.
So yeah, we did that, and it was. I'm really proud. I think that disc, that Blu-ray that came out from Scream Factory, we're like, can we make some stuff? And they're like, yeah. They gave us a little budget, not very big, but it was a budget. I was able to transfer my old tapes and stuff like that, pay a company to do them, and it was great. And I'm really proud of that Blu-ray. I kind of feel that we never got a Blu-ray release. So now the Blu-ray of The Hills Run Red is our way of ending our journey. And it came out in June. So I was really excited that Blu-ray came out. So that's kind of the story of how The Hills Run Red got made. And that's a perfect example to me. Like, you've worked with people for years and years and years, and you're bouncing around. You never know when opportunity will knock. But you have to then do the work. Like with Fever Dreams, we went out and we could have said, we're not going to make a trailer. Never mind. But we're like, nope, let's go make a trailer. And we did. And by the way, they didn't even believe the Fever Dreams guys who brought me the project. They thought I was full of shit and they thought I was lying. They're like, you don't know. How are you going to get this movie to Warner Brothers? I'm like, I don't know. I think it's going to happen. But they didn't believe me. They thought I was bullshitting them. And here's the thing about Hollywood. Everybody's bullshitting everybody else all the time. But the people that are really successful in Hollywood, they don't have to bullshit you.
No.
And so that's where, you know, in my mind, it's like, you can say I'm bullshitting you all you want, but here's the work I've done. You know, you want to, this fan film that I was involved in, the guy who I was involved in with this project, he said so many untrue things about me, just completely made up lies. I'm like, dude, where's your movie? I resigned from your project. Where's the movie? All you need to do is finish the movie, but you can't, and you haven't. So, yeah.
Yeah. Can you go over a couple of super chats with me before you get
absolutely.
out of here?
I got time.
All right. I've got the first one is from Captain Spire. He had a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Captain Spire. He said, hold on. R&B owes me an email. Hail Loki and the chat. Skull from Cardinal Sin.
Oh, yes. Yes, I owe me. Yes.
Mexican Iron Man with a $49.99 super chat says R&B is a true legend. Enterprise was a great movie. His next gen documentary series was epic, amazing, and his daily show is a must watch. His show features intelligent topics. His show satisfies the heart, mind, and soul of true sci-fi fans. Hail, Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, that is very kind of you to say, sir. Very kind of you. Thank you so much. I much appreciate it. And thank you for coming over and watching this stream and supporting this channel, supporting Stone Loki.
Mexican Iron Man has been with us since almost the beginning, and he has been a wonderful friend. Thank you, Mexican Iron Man. Echo Base Network. I love those guys, by the way.
Yeah,
I love those guys too. Did you
see their documentary?
Yeah, I've been with Coach and Nick. I've been watching their channel since the very beginning. I guest sometimes over there. I get to hang out with those guys. True brothers of Valhalla and Echo Base, hand in hand. We love Coach and Nick. They sent in a $4.99 super chat. They did this 3 times. Hail to the great Robert Meyer Burnett. Glad to see you on our brother Loki's channel. You guys both keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very nice, you guys.
And thank you, Echo Base. And Echo Base with another $4.99 super chat. Robert Meyer Burnett, what science fiction book have you read that would make for the best movie adaptation?
Ooh, you know, I'd have to say probably more of a series. There's a series by Dan Simmons called Hyperion. Well, there's 2 books, Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion. They were written as one book. I would love to see that as a streaming series. And maybe in terms of a movie, there's another science fiction book I'm kind of obsessed by. It was written in 2006 by a guy named Peter Watts, and it's kind of dense. But it's called Blind Sight, and it's a first contact story, but it's very interesting, and it's set in the latter, I think it's set in the 2080s. I would love to see Blind Sight get turned into a movie. Those are the 2 that are off the top of my head.
And that is awesome. Echo Base Network with another $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much, guys. Robert Meyer Burnett. Should never bend the knee or apologize for your tweets. In my opinion, cancel culture will eat itself alive.
Yeah, well, you know, what was really funny too, and this is something I learned, because if you don't understand my dark sense of humor, the tweet that was the offending tweet was, I was incredibly offended and shocked by the death of former police captain David Dorn.
Yes.
During the riots. He's a black former police captain in his 70s. Father of 5, grandfather of 10. And he was shot down on the side of the road in front of a pawn shop that he was trying to protect. And he was killed by armed robbers that were using the riots as a cover to go rob this store. It was a premeditated act of robbing the store, and he was killed by another black man as well. So what I had said, my tweet was, I watched this video. It was a video. It made me infuriated to my core.
We watched it with you. We did. I watched it. I watched it
You
because
know,
of you.
and somebody, he's dead on the sidewalk, and so my tweet was, I said, "You want outrage, motherfuckers? You know, where are your Second Amendment people now? Why don't you shoot to kill next time?" You know, something like that. Well, what I meant was, what I was trying to convey is that, and by the way, the tweet was with that video.
Yeah.
I retweeted the video with so I thought it was apparent that I was speaking specifically about this one particular incident, because my thought was, with all of our gun rights advocates, where was somebody that was going to protect David Dorn from getting killed, from getting shot? Now, what it didn't occur to me was, I thought, because I just figure anybody who follows my channel or follows me knows who I am and what I believe in. Well, what happened was the tweet portion that I had said was taken away, was screen capped and retweeted by people I knew and worked with.
Yeah.
And they were saying that they were calling me a Trump supporter. And the thing is, Trump is the president of the United States, for better or for worse, or whatever you think of him, but he is the president of the United States. So being a Trump supporter has never been something that's necessarily bad in my mind. He's the president now. But I am not. I've been pretty much a left-leaning Democrat my whole life. I am very disappointed with the far left, just so you know. The identitarian politics that's being played, I'm not a fan of it at all. But I would consider myself a classical liberal. So anyway, that tweet was taken out of context, and they were saying that I was advocating violence against looters, and that when I said shoot to kill, I meant like kill looters and all this. And that wasn't what I meant at all.
No.
And when my tweet was removed from the video, it suddenly became this generic thing. And what was interesting is that it was people that I worked with, you know. But when I'm part of the Schmodown, I was playing this character, the captain, and again, I would walk in with this flamboyant jacket and this attitude and play this character that was screaming and yelling, and then I would leave. So I didn't really hang out with anybody, so they didn't really know me. And I really liked doing the Schmodown. I think the Schmodown is a lot of fun. I really like what Mark Ellis and Christian Harloff built with the Schmodown. I really had a good time doing it. So when it was people that I worked with at the Schmodown who were coming after me, I was perplexed. And I'm like, do you think I'm this guy, this character? Like, I mean, nobody watched my YouTube channel. So it was a little disheartening to see what happened. And I understand, you know, Christian, it was fomenting a lot. I mean, I was getting threats, you know, from people that were going to come. I had to actually figure out when people send you threats online or they text you things, you have to take it seriously. But people were actually threatening to kill me. You know, that's what people say, but you can't not take it seriously. And then I found out and I think when you find out, you know, because I know enough people where I can find out exactly where ISP numbers are, and I would just write back and go, listen, man, I know where you're at. I know where your hometown is. And I would send somebody like a picture from Google Street Views. I know where you're at. Please stop harassing me. You know, no call for that. But it was weird. It was weird. Now, the thing that and by the way, I'd apologized for that tweet. People were calling me immediately going, maybe you shouldn't have written that. And I realized, once it was taken out of context. But I did apologize because a lot of people didn't understand. Because once it was taken out of context and people were saying that that's what I meant, then I realized I've got to apologize for this because that's not what I meant. But I did pop off at this one person that I work with who was the person at the forefront of this. I swore at him online. I said, fuck you, man.
Yeah.
And that was wrong. I should have contacted him. I should have explained myself. And I said, look, we've worked together for 2 years. I mean, I don't know why you'd think that I'm this way. But then other people were coming after me that I work with, calling me like a garbage person. And I'm like, all right, you know, if that's your opinion, I've never spoken an unkind word to you. Yeah. But, you know, it was just weird. It was weird to be on the forefront of that. And then to find out that, and what was really interesting about it is how your thoughts get twisted and people use what you're saying against you. And that's the thing that what was most shocking to me is people that you would think that you've worked with, that you think know you based on your words, based on behavior over the period of years, that don't, and that would come after you. That was kind of scary, but it taught me something. But I had to fall back on the fact that you can look at literally thousands of hours of me on the internet talking. So if you think I am this way, I can honestly say I am not this way, and you are mistaken. So luckily, your work, again, having your work to fall back on speaks for itself. And I think that's always a good thing to be mindful of. But on the other hand, people will come after you. If they want you canceled, they don't care if you have, like, I've got 2 teenage girls I live with my girlfriend. I mean, we're a family, you know, and when you get canceled, you're harming, who knows how many people you're harming, or if you're going after people online like that. So
no, I agree. I've had some people, what's wrong with you, Loki? Why aren't you on camera? What are you, obese? Are you ugly? Are you the Hunchback of Notre Dame? I tell them, no, I worked in the prison industry for years. Imagine what happens if I get doxxed. What happens to my kids? What happens to my family? What happens if someone says, I never liked him, I'm going to go after him and I'm going to do something to him? So anonymity is my best friend. You start getting threats like that and you don't have that. I can't imagine. I can't imagine the worry. I can't imagine the financial burden you start to come under. For saying the person that did this. This is why you have this, is for the person that did this. And then you get thrown into this arena of you're talking about everyone when you're talking about one single person that murders someone in cold blood.
Well, and also, for me, once this backlash happened and I was dismissed from the Schmodown, then it becomes an internet story. And then that story is there forever. And if I'm trying to go raise money to make a project, then someone does a cursory Google search about me. What is one of the first things that come up? Rob Burnett is dismissed from the Schmodown for being a racist man who's fomenting violence against looters.
Yeah.
And then I'm in a position where I have to explain that.
Yeah.
And that is something else that nobody takes into consideration. I mean, rather than deal with this in a professional manner, it becomes on social media, and suddenly all these people are coming after me. And I'm like going, it was just a tweet, man, Yeah. So you have to be careful. But you can ruin, now a whole life can be ruined in an instant. I mean, it's one thing for people to abuse other human beings horribly, like Harvey Weinstein or something like that. But now you can lose your entire livelihood over one tweet.
Yeah.
That people don't like. That's terrifying.
It is. It is. And Kai MFS, who recently got his book published over on Amazon, it is called Domino, sent in a $3 super chat and said, science fiction is the GOAT. Preach, Robert Meyer Burnett.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. It absolutely is. And I think that, if you want to see where our culture and our world is going, the best science fiction, you have very thoughtful authors that are extrapolating where our culture is going to go. And that's why I think it's important. It matters.
Yeah, it does. It does. An Ords board sends in a $4.99 super chat and says, maybe made $100 on YouTube. I don't do it for the money. I love entertaining and creating. Mm-hmm. It will even affect your personal life, and I still love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. I mean, if you don't like it, then YouTube can be too hard, man. If you don't like what you're doing, and I'll tell you something else. I found out more about YouTube from other creators. Like, one of the things that there's this girl named Shelby Church, who I don't know, and her content is not something I would normally watch. I actually found out a lot about YouTube. She popped up in my feed, I don't know why, one day, it was a video about how much money she made off of a certain YouTube video. I've just learned more, like, random random channels that I run across that I'm like, this is interesting. And I think YouTube is a great resource. One of my favorite channels on YouTube, but I warn everybody, if you don't know about this channel, there's a channel called 3D, I think it's called 3D Bot Maker. And all they do is run races with Hot Wheels cars. 1/64th scale Hot Wheels cars. And they have like different tournaments and they film it like it's a real race. And they've got these two guys that do it's like you're watching a sporting event.
Yeah.
And they just race die-cast cars. That's all it is. And it is my favorite. It's one of my favorite. You watch it. Look, I'm not saying that everybody's going to sit and watch races with 61, 64 scale Hot Wheels cars, but the way they do it, once you start watching it, and they have tournaments, like they'll have tournaments. They just finished a tournament with cars and movies. Like they'll have James Bond versus Marty McFly versus BJ Baracus from the A-Team versus somebody else. And then they race these four cars down the mountain in four separate heats to see who will win. I'm telling you, man, I don't even know where they came up with this idea, but that's why I love YouTube. Yeah. And I learned so much. There's so many channels. There's automotive YouTube where all these like young kids in their 20s basically that all own supercars. And like there's this one guy called the Strad Man, and he's a self-made man. And that's his channel, this STRADMAN. I don't have a supercar. I don't know if I'll ever own a supercar in my life, but his channel, if you watch the Strad Man, he's always got a smile on his face and he's buying Lamborghinis and everything. If I need a pick-me-up, I'll just watch one of his videos. And then there's even... Oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, then there's this guy, Life of Palos, and that's his channel. And he does a news show about other automotive YouTubers, and it's hilarious. And I love that guy. So again, something I wouldn't normally be interested in, but I do watch his shows.
I've told a couple of different people, if you're not having fun doing this, don't do this.
Right.
I love getting up in the morning. I love greeting everyone in the morning. I love having fun. I love doing this. It's what I love to do.
Yeah.
Orange Board with another $1.99 super chat says, "Hail the Fandom Menace and Robert Meyer Burnett." Purple Valkyrie with a £5 super chat says, "I could listen to you gentlemen talk for hours. Thank you, Robert Meyer Burnett and Loki, for a wonderful show. It was a real treat to watch this awesome interview."
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. That's very nice.
And our last one is from Fat Steven with a $2 Canadian super chat. That is Fat Steven Seagal beat up Ryan Johnson. And he says, "What's your favorite Steven Seagal movie?" Robert Meyer Burnett.
You know what? I have to say it's probably the first one, Above the Law. You know, because I didn't know who Steven Seagal was, and I really loved Steven Seagal in that actually the first four. So there's and it was Hard to Kill. I think it was hard to Kill.
That's the one where he wakes up in the hospital and he's been in a coma.
Well, if I want to say Hard to Kill there's a Sylvester Stallone movie called Nighthawks where he goes after Rutger Hauer, who plays Wolfgar. And I believe, if memory serves, that was directed by Bruce Malmuth, who then directed Hard to Kill. And I think I was at Warner Brothers when we made Hard to Kill, and Bruce Malmuth directed that, and I got to meet him. I'm like, "You directed Nighthawks with Sylvester Stallone, and now you're directing Steven Seagal." I mean, but I still think Above the Law is it was the first Seagal movie, I think, and it's still my favorite because he was such a badass in that. So, yep. Did I lose you? Or are you still there?
I'm here. I'm here. I don't know what happened.
Oh.
I want to thank you. Thank you so very much.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? This is a blast.
Thank you. Thank you, chat. Thank you, everyone who popped in, who's been watching this. And one last one from Lady Mist with a $5 super chat. Fantastic stream, Loki and Robert Meyer Burnett. And she's throwing flowers and green fire. Green fire is kind of our thing around here.
I love getting green fire. That just sounds like something I would like to be enveloped in, especially thrown by Lady Mist. What's not to love?
She is our guardian of the void here in Valhalla. I accidentally, I had the chat open on my phone, and I accidentally timed her out for like 300 seconds because something with the phone. So she got sent to the void. I'm so sorry, Lady Mist. Oh, but it has been an absolute pleasure. I hope we can have you on again. I really do. I've absolutely loved this. In the future, I would love to have you on again.
Oh yeah, it's great. Absolutely. I mean, you know, we're in lockdown back here in Los Angeles, so it's almost as if the last 8 months didn't happen.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, 2020. Everybody stay safe out there, by the way.
Yes, everybody stay safe, guys. I'm gonna give you some Kratos on our way out. Thank you again, Rob, for being here. You guys have a great day, and me and Adega will be on in a little under 3 hours for 7 Kinds of Mischief. So we will see you then.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.
All right, man.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.